Hey everybody, we'll get started right on the top of the hour. Hey Ellen, we'll get started in 2 minutes. Hey everyone, Marty Yadrick here. Really excited to be with you all today. Uh, First of all, I know I'm supposed to give my social media channels, so my Twitter handle is MartyRDN, and Facebook is my name, Marty Yadrick. LinkedIn is Marty Yadrick RDN. And Instagram is MMYADR because my middle name is Michael. And so those are my social media channels. And just to begin with, I guess a little bit of background. As I mentioned on the teaser the other day, I've been a dietitian for 40 years. I was registered first in 1981. Boy, has that time gone by fast. Hard to believe it. And people a lot of times will ask me, how did you end up in dietetics? And my first response is that I've always had an interest in the relationship of nutrition to wellness. And I've always valued the importance of science, even from way back when I started wondering, do we need these supplements or can we get what we need from food? That's kind of what got me started. But the other thing that's pretty significant is that my sister is a dietitian. Now, a lot of you know that. She's my only sibling. She's 8 years older than me, so she was a dietitian several years before I was. But we went very different pathways. She was ended up being a university professor at Southern Miss for 30 years. And she was department chair for part of that time, and she just retired a couple of years ago. So I always tell everyone that she, being in the field, at least created the awareness for me that that profession existed, and that's I think where I got started. But in college, I switched my major around a lot. When I got a C in organic chemistry, I thought, well, maybe this isn't the career I should be taking. But I ended up back in there a year later. And yeah, my sister's a dietitian. Yep. And I ended up back up in there and then finished. And then I tried to get an internship and didn't get an internship. I was an alternate and nothing came through that year. So I just worked at a stationery company in customer service for a year in my hometown, which is Colorado Springs, where I grew up. And then the next year I applied again, and I was an alternate again. I thought, okay, well, Lord, if I'm not supposed to be in dietetics, then I won't get a spot in the internship. Well, it ended up I did get a spot in the internship. That was, 1980. So it's been an interesting path. And then after my internship, my first job was in a long-term care section of a large county-run medical center. After that, I worked at a Veterans Administration hospital in Leavenworth, Kansas. And then I worked as a clinical dietitian again, but in a regular hospital in the city where I was the cardiac rehab dietitian. And I also, because the hospital owned a fitness wellness center out in the suburbs back then, this was in Kansas City, I was their sports dietitian and did some weight management and sports nutrition, which is really what got me started being involved in the SCAN DPG, was being in that cardiac rehab position. As I worked in that position over the 6 years I was there, I enjoyed it a lot, but then decided that I didn't want to stay in clinical dietetics for the rest of my career, so I started working on an MBA. And I took courses only in the evening, so it took me 5 years and finished that up. And then was hired back at the university where I did my internship, which is University of Kansas Medical Center, for an administrative position that was not a food service administration position, but it was a departmental administration. So I did the department budgeting, cafeteria and catering profit and loss statements, and I was a preceptor for dietetic interns on those areas, finance and human resources, and did that for 3 years until my partner ended up getting a job in LA. And so we moved to LA, me without a job. Uh, I remember applying for lecturer positions at some universities out there, but not hearing anything from them. And then, because of my connections, my involvement in the academy and people that I'd met, at the time I was a media spokesperson for the academy, and they let me transfer from the Kansas City media market to Los Angeles. And a dietitian who was one of those spokespeople said, "Why don't you talk to Ellen LaRose? Because she has this company called Computrition." Well, that was 1993. And when I called up, I said that I was this media spokesperson. They were called ADA ambassadors back then. And I got right through to her. Instead of going through the administrative assistant being sent back to HR and asked to apply and taking forever to hear about something, I had a job offer within 3 or 4 days. And I've been there since 1993. So it was really interesting that it was because of my involvement in a role, a volunteer role in dietetics. That's how I ended up getting a job, just finding out about the job and then luckily getting the job. And it ended up being something, a place that I'm very happy. I've been there, like I said, since 1993. So, I must like it. Um, and and really what I had stepped into without realizing it was called that was nutrition informatics. Uh, because Computrition is a software company that automates food nutrition department functions at hospitals, long-term care centers, correctional facilities, and other larger institutions like that. So fast forward quite a bit to my involvement as I became more involved in the academy. I ended up on the board of directors, and in 2006, these two incredible dietitians named Elaine Ayers and Lindsay Hoggle came to the board and said, "Hey, there is this practice area called informatics, and the doctors are there and the nurses are there, but we're not there yet in dietetics, and we need to get ourselves on the map." And they really did an amazing job of educating the board on this. They came to the board originally in '06 to develop a nutrition informatics DPG, and at the time, the board felt that informatics, after we understood it better, crossed over every area of practice, whether you're in clinical, community, public health, research, food service management, informatics. You're doing it every day, whether you call it that or not. You're doing it. And but we did develop. The board did approve the establishment of a nutrition informatics work group, and then which led into an official nutrition informatics committee, which ultimately years later has led to the nutrition informatics DPG, which started in the previous fiscal year. So it's sort of come full circle now, where there is a nutrition informatics DPG that has about 400 members already. And so, those of you that are Academy members interested in all in informatics, that is a DPG that I would definitely suggest that you join because they've got a lot of resources. They've got a community. I always call it a bulletin board, but a way that you can ask questions to members of the group, like you probably do with any other DPGs if you're an Academy member. Uh, and then people ask me quite often about education, further education in nutrition informatics. Well, when I got more involved because of what I was hearing from Lindsay and Elaine, I heard about a course called the 10 by 10. And where that course got its name was the goal to educate back in like the mid 2000 first decade of this century. The goal was to educate 10,000 healthcare professionals on informatics by the year 2010. Well, I don't know if they ever achieved that goal, but there are at least 4,500 people that have taken this 10 by 10 course. Now, it is not cheap. It's almost $2,300 to take it. It's an introductory online course in biomedical informatics that's offered by several universities. I took mine through Oregon Health and Science University, which is in Portland, Oregon. But again, this is an online course. The University of Minnesota, I believe, offers one. University of Illinois, Chicago offers one. UAB, Alabama, Birmingham offers one right now. And it is a great introductory course in biomedical informatics that is well respected across the spectrum of people in any area of healthcare informatics. So I took this course, and then when you finish the course, you have an option of taking a final. If you take the final, then you get 3 graduate credits, at least from OHSU, where I took mine from. And then I thought, well, I've got these 3 graduate credits, and I found out that they had a biomedical informatics graduate certificate, which was either 21 or 24 credits. So I thought, why don't I go ahead and in my free time, I'll pursue that. So that took me a couple of years, and I got that. And then I thought, well, now I have half a master's degree in biomedical informatics. Why don't I just keep going? And I was getting some tuition assistance from work, so that helped. And so a few years later, I was able to get my master's. The MBI stands for Master of Biomedical Informatics. And as part of that degree, we had to do a capstone project, which is sort of like a mini thesis. So I went to the academy. I said, "You guys got anything going on in that area?" And they told me about something new called Andy, which was the Academy's Health Informatics Infrastructure, which is an online portal for recording patient or client visits in a de-identified manner, and then being able to follow up on those visits. And all those visits, you can use the drop downs for the nutrition care process terminology. So it was great for me. I got introduced to what Andy was. I got to be a big part of the beginning of Andy, and I'm actually on an Andy work group still. And we published an article of a study we did back in 2014 on the feasibility of Andy. In other words, the opinions of dietitians about using it. And that was published in the 2018 journal. So that's really what education I've had in informatics. And now, because of this background, I'm invited a lot to speak to students or groups of dietetics folks, like state meetings and things like that, on informatics. There is an internship in Los Angeles. I live in Kansas City now. That's why I'm wearing red. Go Chiefs. There's an internship in Los Angeles called the Greater Los Angeles Dietetic Internship Consortium. And so it's a large group of interns. And every year they have me speak to them. Now, the last couple of years, it's been virtually on the topic of general nutrition informatics. I had another university in Florida had me speak to them this last year. Actually, this October, I had 3 different speaking engagements on the topic. So there's definitely a lot of interest in it, and people are realizing how important it is in innovation in our profession, and how more and more people are using apps. Some of these interns that I spoke to were actually developing apps of their own. So it's an area that permeates everything that we do. All right, let me take a look at some of the questions that are coming in. Let's see. So one of the remarks is so you have an MBA. That's cool. Ellen Shanley has an MBA as well. It seems like many RDs are unfamiliar with this type of career path in informatics. Are there types of skills that are interest personality types that seem a better fit for this type of career? Gee, I don't know. I mean, I think I picked an MBA to start out with because, well, I really didn't have much training in business except the basics that we get as dietetics undergraduates. Um, I wanted to move into some other position. I didn't know at the time what position that would might be, but I thought an MBA would be a good foundation for any type of career, and it did open a door for me right away to go right back to the university where I did my internship and get a position. And it hasn't hurt. I don't list it right now in my credentials just because I think if you have more than like four credentials, maybe that's a little much, but that's up to each individual person. So I think the MBI, the informatics degree, is one that I do list because that's more reflective of what I'm doing day in, day out. Okay, let's see what else we have here. Accessing your many years of professional wisdom and expertise, I'm curious how you might describe the benefits and drawbacks of the internet and its associated lack of regulation guardrails at inception and then widespread use starting at the early 1990s on our profession and ethical practice. Yeah, that's a really significant comment. Um, Misinformation has always been out there. It just hasn't been so readily available at everybody's fingertips. And there's all these memes that you see on Facebook and other social media now about, somebody got their information from a really bad video and they think that that bad video and the information in that is valid. I mean, I'm not saying it the right way, but you know what I mean. It's total misinformation, or it may be someone that some people respect, like Dr. Oz or somebody like that. You have to make sure that, first of all, you're not basing your. I mean, we're dietitians or dietechnicians. We're supposed to base everything that we do on science, and it's hard to get away from anecdotal stuff if you've had the experience yourself. But we all know that that isn't science, and we should never make recommendations to patients or clients based on that kind of evidence. So, uh, whatever we see, and it's our responsibility, I think, whatever we see on social media like the internet, we need to take it with a grain of salt to know whether or not is this just one study that's reporting these uh, outcomes, or is it a body of evidence? Is it a systematic review that we then could maybe change recommendations based on uh, this body of evidence that's out there? That's why I think like the Academy's evidence analysis library can be so useful in that regard, because those expert work groups, they pull people in that are experts in that particular area of whatever question they're looking at, and they scour the what's out there available and look at those studies and then grade the evidence. And that's a great service to us those folks are there to do that for us. But yeah, you've got to be very discerning on that. Yeah, a shout out for Leslie Bonsi. Of course, many of you know Leslie Bonsi is the team dietitian for the Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs, who, in my opinion, hopefully will be the repeat champions coming this Sunday. You know, this is me, has never been a football fan before, pro football fan. But since living in Kansas City again, it's really an exciting thing. And I must say that our quarterback is a true gentleman, a sportsman, a polite guy, and he isn't on a weird diet like that other quarterback is. That's on all these non-evidence based related things that you know who is on. So and that for all those reasons, I support my hometown quarterback and team. Uh, okay, I've been a staunch supporter of the academy and served as president of the academy. Yeah, some new members or younger members don't see the value of being a member. So, do you want to speak to a little to this? Is what the question is. Yeah, I certainly will. I feel very, very strongly about the importance of academy membership. I know that people have disagreed with the way the academy may have done some things, and think about your country and who is running your country at any given time, or your church or temple, and who is, in administrative roles in those places, and whether or not you agree with the things that they do or the way that they're running the country, the church, the organization, or anything like that. You're always going to find things that go on that you don't agree with. I mean, I know how I stand politically. I know how I stand in my particular brand of denomination of my faith. And I still feel like being loyal to that is, well, first of all, you can't really make change unless you're, I mean, you can make more effective change if you're in the organization. And I've been on the board of directors twice now for long periods of time each time. And I see those dedicated people who really care about our profession and making sure that we're doing the right thing in our profession. And some of the decisions are really, really tough. The other point related to that is if you think about the things that Academy member dollars are going for, like the efforts that we make in Washington, D.C. to be proponents of legislation that are important related to nutrition, like SNAP benefits and the reauthorization of the Older Americans Act and the MNT expansion bills and the bill that recently would help all the traditional land grant, or not land grant, but the black universities, Howard and those universities. There was some legislation that we were proponents of that would help those traditional black colleges. There's a lot of things that DC office does, and that DC office is supported. I mean, their operation is supported by our dues. Their contributions to politicians are supported by the PAC, your donations to the PAC, which is a totally separate entity. So for what we do in DC, I think being a member is really important, because if you're not a member, you're still getting the benefit of the work that's being done there. The communications and public relations and media spokespeople for the Academy, those the work of those people are supported by membership dues, and you're getting the benefit of that by their appearances in the media, and all the other things that are benefits that you receive either directly as a member or indirectly as a non-member. I think it's important, in my personal opinion, is important to make change from the inside rather than the outside. With my generation, yeah, I'm a baby boomer. It was kind of like expected. I mean, our internship director, you had to join when you finished the internship. And it was sort of, I guess, when you go to these talks about generational differences, one of the things in my generation, the one before me, is more this sort of duty of loyalty. So I think from that standpoint, I feel like I need to be a member. But I think having been a volunteer, I started out being a volunteer in dietetics in 1986 with my district dietetic association PR department. And what we did back then, I said, well, let's get a project going where we get famous people in the town, newscasters and sports people and mayors of the suburban areas, and get them to keep a 2 or 3 day food diary and then just take a look at it and give them feedback. That was just a fun little project. We had a billboard for National Nutrition Month, and RG is the nutrition expert on a really prominent area headed into downtown. So I had fun back then in 1986, and I just thought, well, if they want me to do other stuff, I'll keep going. And that's kind of where I kept going. My district association, my state association, both in Missouri when I lived there and in California, in DPGs like SCAN, and then the Nutrition Informatics DPG. And, now I'm on the ballot again for nominating committee. So it's just, people have been good to me, and I hope I've served students well and other colleagues well over the years. So I want to just keep giving back, and that's kind of why I'm there. There's another question. Have you seen the Academy or the profession of dietetics change over time? Could you highlight maybe one or two big differences since you started in dietetics? Well, boy, that's tough. I think we're reaching out a lot more uh, in a lot of ways. If you look at their the strategic plan, the Academy strategic plan, which this current plan was put in place back in '07, '08, I was president-elect that year, and I was the chair of that committee. Now, it's evolved over the years, which it should. It's never meant to be a static document. It's always meant to be dynamic. But if you see some of the changes in the plan over the years, it's gotten more and more global in its outreach. It's gotten more into the area of food insecurity that wasn't something that was as prominent, in my opinion, in years past. So I think we've learned, and I have to give folks like our current CEO credit for reaching out to other organizations and partnering with important organizations that help us make a difference on a national level and more of a global level as well. So I think I'm trying to think of other changes since I started in dietetics. Well, certainly when I was president of the academy, social media was kind of like not quite there. It was maybe in its infancy. And so the way we communicated was more through emails and press releases and things like that. Well, now with social media, the academy leaders of all types and DPG leaders, well, you see yourselves, your practice group leadership, your friends of yours that are in have their own media presences that write for magazines and other media. You see them in social media all the time, every single day. And those of us that are not doing that kind of thing, I think our job in social media is to promote those folks by, liking or sharing their evidence-based information. I don't like to get into fights on social media with people. I'd rather maybe just bypass something I don't agree with, but that's entirely up to you and your comfort level. I think, I have taken the pledge of civility that the Academy has. So if there are any disagreements, I think there's the right way to do it. But that's just kind of me and the way I like to approach things. So we got about 6 more minutes. If anybody has other questions, or I'll try to think of something else I could talk about. Um, Trying to think of what else I could mention. Um, I think the thing that's been the most rewarding for me is over these 40 years has been the wonderful friendships I made from involvement in dietetics related organizations, and anything that I could do to help a student or a young member or any member really uh, makes me feel like my career has meant something. So I think all of you, regardless of your age, to look at that. How can you help others? Whether it's helping a student out or writing a reference letter for somebody or doing something like that. Yeah, somebody wrote big change moving from LA to KC. Well, KC, my family is originally from KC. I wasn't born here because my dad was in the Air Force. And so I was born in Northern California outside of Oakland. And then we lived in Naples, Italy, and moved away. Well, my dad was transferred to Colorado Springs. We moved away from Naples, Italy, like 1 month before Leah McGrath was born in Naples, Italy. So who knew all these years later? And so Colorado Springs is where I consider my hometown always, because I moved there when I was 4 years old and I lived there till I was an adult. I went to college in Colorado at Colorado State and then moved away for grad school and internship in 1980. So Kansas City was where my parents are from, though, both of them. So I have a lot of generations in the city. LA was great. It was a great place to live. I don't think I'd want to retire in Los Angeles, but it's just whatever people like. And I like the mid-sized big city that Kansas City is. Um, so what I would say to each of you, stay involved, volunteer for something, whether it's like a food bank or some other effort in your community. I did some volunteer work at a soup kitchen that was based at a Methodist church for several years every Monday, and that was a really wonderful experience for me. Get involved if you're a member of the academy. Get involved. You'll make connections, and you will be able to serve your profession and be a true servant leader, which is what should be your goal. Okay. A question just came in. How do you recommend getting over fear of the unknown, trying a new area like informatics. Right now, I live and breathe clinical. Well, sure. In clinical dietetics, in this day and age, you're certainly using electronic health record, and there are nutrition notes that you're putting in there. Hopefully, there's objective drop-down fields with nutrition care process in there, but maybe not. But you're using informatics every day. Um, it may be what some of my colleagues and friends in informatics have done is they've been in a clinical position and then maybe they've served as the system administrator or application administrator for like my company software like Computrition or Seaboard or Delegate or one of our competitors like that. And that position sort of opened the doors to a position in IT. So maybe they're still at the same facility, like one friend of mine's at St. Jude's in Memphis and others at the Cleveland Clinic in Ohio. And there are others, one in Portland, Oregon, who are all dietitians, but there was an IT related position that opened up. Yeah, the question is saying I'm a super user and help IT with our redesigns for Cerner. So to me, that's the perfect like segue into an informatics job rather than just leaving dietetics and hoping that you get something in informatics. I think getting whatever education you can, if you're an academy member, like I said, joining the informatics DPG is a must. And the networking that you do there. If you can afford the 10 by 10, just go to amia.org, amia.org/amia 10 by 10, 10x10, 10 by 10. And if you can afford it, it's a great introductory course in biomedical informatics that I recommend for anyone that's interested in that area. But it is expensive, so uh, keep that in mind. And then just look for what's available, maybe in your IT department if you're in a clinical position, or maybe in an IT department if you're in a community health department type setting or a supermarket setting. Maybe there's something that you could assist with related to IT. So it's such a broad area that it's hard for me to say, here's one right here. I know if someone wants to come work at my company, we have 20% of our employees are dietitians, and a lot of them are trainers, software trainers, and they were on the road all the time, or they were before COVID. And now that's gradually going back to heavier travel. Um, so there are opportunities out there in that area. And just to repeat my social media information, my Twitter handle is Marty RDN. I'm not on there a lot, but I do get notifications on Twitter. Uh, Facebook is my name, Marty Yadrick. LinkedIn is Marty Yadrick RDN, and Instagram is MMYADR. So, getting a nice thank you note from Build Up Dietitians. It's really a pleasure to have joined you today. I was nervous as heck, but this has been a lot of fun. So, thanks for joining and take care and see all the ways that you can give back to your profession by being an evidence based servant leader. Thanks. Bye.